Well, okay then. Mr. Chair.
I'm waiting till 7 o'clock. I've got 1 minute.
According to our timers, it's
I'm
7
looking
o'clock.
at my computer.
Ah. Well, that's the deal. We should get, that should be a digital clock.
Yeah. Okay, it is 7 o'clock. So I'm calling this meeting to order. Nikki, would you do a roll call?
Commissioner Orsi,
Here.
Commissioner Scobie is sick, she is absent. Commissioner Scobie,
Housekeeping, you mean?
Paskey.
I'm here.
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 Here. Here.
Thank you.
Okay. Did everybody read the minutes and stuff from the last meeting that we need to approve?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Did anybody have any objections or corrections to those?
Mhm.
Then the meetings will stand approved as written. All right, public comment time. If you have anything to say talk about that is not on the agenda, then you are free to do it. You have not that many people. You have 4 minutes.
We had a public comment email. Is that person? We had an email that,
You know, I saw that and it said, do this, and I couldn't get into it.
Mm.
I don't know if it was my computer or something, so I have no idea what it said.
there's a link.
It was a link, but it wouldn't, my computer said page not found.
Bear, I'm gonna unmute and say, we can copy paste. It was an article about vacation rental, so we can just copy paste it into a Word document and send it to you if you haven't read it yet.
No, I have not.
I have not either.
Okay, we'll make a note to do that for you.
Okay. Anybody else have anything they'd like to speak up on? Anybody on Zoom? Okay. Well, so far it's going fairly smoothly. Okay, we're gonna have a review right now. Who ended up with the paint swatches?
Right here.
There.
Here they are. We're looking for the owners of the building that Coastal Mist is in is looking for an approval for colors that are not on the chart. But the colors that are not on the chart, did everybody see the thing that came out? They're very close. And this is the one that they want to put on.
I think that's the only one that isn't on the chart, right? There's three
Right,
of them.
there's 3 others that are on the
There's a
chart.
tan and a black and that one. And
But
that's
Well, there's another green too.
right.
It's right.
It's a duller green.
Yeah. And one of the things that they said was, and I totally agree, was that quite often the colors, when they go up on a big wall because of light and reflection and everything, are quite a bit lighter. And this isn't that different from the other ones.
It's a little richer.
Yeah, it's a little deeper,
Mhm.
but, and the pictures they showed of it, you know, artificially painting it are, they look pretty good. And I like their plan.
Well, plus there's other changes, right? Outside lighting and
Right, but that's not what we're talking. We're just talking about the color here. And, is there a staff report on this? Would you read it?
Well, background.
Go ahead.
The applicant's Navmart owns a building in Old Town that contains the business Coastal Mist. Their property is located in an architectural overlay zone, so they require the certificate of appropriateness.
Dana, is that, the color is the only thing we're considering here?
You can use that.
Nothing else?
That's right, yeah, so the code states that the planning director has the ability to review and approve like all the other things that you can change to your building when you're in the architectural review overlay zone. But the city has a pre-approved color palette. If you remember back to 2021, you all updated it then. If someone selects a color outside of that palette, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not allowed. It just means that it requires planning commission approval at this time. So because it wasn't on the color palette, we've brought it to you this evening to approve that. The other items will be approved by staff through that same certificate of appropriateness.
Yeah, I shouldn't be a big deal. But let's get the background anyway. I'd like to hear it.
I'm sorry, are you waiting for that from me? I'm happy to do that. If you need me to.
Would you rather she did it, Nikki? Okay,
I just can't hear what's going on because Nikki doesn't have a microphone. So if Nikki was doing it, I'm sorry to have hopped in.
no, go ahead.
Okay, so I'll just go through briefly in the staff report, if that would be helpful. So we received an application. It's a type 2 request, which means that we send out notice to property owners within 100 feet and we allow them 14 days to comment. We did receive one comment from Shawnette Corkill, who owns Front Door Back, which is the company that the Chamber of Commerce hired to do a series of sort of renderings of a couple of businesses in Old Town to help them use the city's facade loan program, and I think, you know, just their own money to update the facades of their buildings. So you'll see what she submitted both in her comment and then what was submitted as part of their application. So again, I mean, staff, we review certificates of appropriateness for any change to any building in Old Town because it has the architectural review overlay zone. And then Coastal Mist has applied for this whole list of things. The one thing that we're asking the Planning Commission to review and approve is the shade of green that has not been pre-approved.
Right.
So yes, if you choose to approve, we recommend that you just direct staff to issue a certificate of appropriateness approving the color choice as presented.
So audience, what do you think? This is the green.
Yeah, and
This is a tan trim and there's
the other
also,
side.
oh, that had writing on it, didn't it?
Yeah.
Tan trim, and then it also has black.
And
And
it-
they're also using black.
And if you look at the one page, page 3 on there, and it shows what was approved, the Atlantic foam, it's just a little bit grayer. This is a little bit bolder. I like it better, actually.
Mhm.
But, so would somebody like to make a motion that we recommend the staff approve it?
I'll make a motion that we recommend the staff approve the color palette choice that they have suggested.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Well, that was easy. Okay, now we get to the, just a minute, let me get it up and going. Come on. All right, we have a code cleanup that we've discussed numerous times. And, I can't get to it here.
The first item of the code cleanup has to do with approving a change regarding parking in motels.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Do we need?
There,
Dana?
yeah,
Okay.
would you like me to go through it for you?
Yeah.
Maybe you ought to go through it for us.
Yeah, I had it.
If you have a cane, that would be appreciated too, because some of us are, you know.
All right.
Okay, I'm gonna start with, yes, this is the annual code cleanup. We did talk a little bit about this earlier on in the year. We have added a couple items since that initial discussion, but there's really 4 things included in it. One is the changing from hotels requiring 1 parking space for every 2 rooms to having 1 space for every room, which would match the same as the motels. The second change is this coastal mist application sparked some discussion about how long it takes to get approval for something like a new color choice. So we're recommending that you just change it to a type 2 decision where the planning director can approve. And if it's appealed, it goes to the planning commission. Just based on when this application was submitted, it took almost 2 months to get them an answer. So that is a little challenging. The third one is a clarification of the city's commercial design standards. This has come up a couple times. I've included in the attached ordinance all of that, the sort of section about when the commercial design standards apply. The first one just reads really confusing, and we've had multiple people come in and ask, like, well, is it all commercial development or is it only on Highway 101? The line here is that the commercial design standards apply. Right now it says all commercial development in any light industrial zone abutting Highway 101 and in the C2 zone subject to other provisions. But then later there's other ways where, or other sections where it only applies to LI or it only applies to C2. So we just want to clarify that and say, kind of lump all the light industrial stuff together and lump all the C2 stuff together. Also, feel free to discuss if any of these other exemptions are should be allowed or not. There just have been some times where we can't figure out when we're applying the commercial design standards or not. And then finally, do you want to talk about those 3 and then we can talk about the reorganization? I just want to make sure that there's no concerns with any of those 3.
That would make sense to me, certainly, if
Sure.
we talk about the first 3. The 2 seem to be pretty simple.
Number
First
1
two.
and number 2, does anybody have any objections?
Yeah, I'd like to talk about number 2. I was not on the planning commission when the color palette was approved. And my notes don't say why we left the variance decision with the planning commission, why it didn't get defaulted to the planning director at that time. Does anyone remember?
I was not here for that meeting, so I don't remember.
I don't recall. I'm sorry.
I think
It was just an update to the palette.
Yeah, just an update to the palette. It already had been that way.
Okay,
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna hop in and say. The only update portion that we did was actually updating the colors. The existing color palette was much more muted, and there was a desire from property owners in Old Town to update that. So the Greater Bandon Association's design committee developed a new set of colors, which we brought through multiple meetings with the Planning Commission to make sure they were acceptable. And so we never, we did start to look at the language of who approves what when we did a code cleanup that changed our process. It didn't used to be as clear as it is now, even though I still think it's not as clear as it could be. But now we have a type 1 through 4 process. Before it would just say zoning compliance, plan review, conditional use permit, or some sort of public hearing, etc. And so that portion never got changed. That like the color choice was the planning commission's approval and not staff with appeal to the planning commission. So it's just, I mean, I feel like it's a code cleanup item because it's just really unclear right now in the code who should be approving that decision.
And yeah, and I would definitely say that we ought to move that away from us. Because the thing is, if there's never going to be somebody who wants, from flaming pink. And if they do, and the planners say, oh, you can do that, it'll get appealed.
who appeals it? So say that someone like me that's very poor with colors was the planning director after Dana retires, and I think canary yellow is a great color. And I say, as the planning director, well, yellow's on the palette, this is just a variance of the yellow, and I approve it as the planning director, what's the appeal process? How do we keep that from going forward?
First person can then appeal it to the planning commission.
Who would appeal it though?
Anybody?
Whoever's making the color
Well,
ask request.
Can I just hop in and say it would be anyone, so the type 2 process, we send notice, we post notice 14 days in advance and we send notice to folks within 100 feet. So it'd just be changing the approving body from the planning commission to the planning director, but the appeal process is the same. So anyone who participates in a hearing can, or in a decision, can appeal it. I would also add that the code is very explicit as well, that the planning director can bring anything to the planning commission. I think the example that was given tonight with Coastal Mist, that's a pretty benign color choice, right? It's pretty similar and complementary to what already exists. And in an effort to expedite the process, I think it makes sense for the planning director or the planning department really to be approving those things. If it were canary yellow or hot pink or something like that, I think that's an indication to whomever the planning director is that that's probably something that would rise to the level of needing planning commission approval without requiring people to go through an appeal process to bring it to the planning commission.
Yeah, I think it makes perfect sense.
And those within 100 feet will probably react to one of those anyway.
Yeah, yeah, if somebody next to me wanted to paint their building pink, I'd definitely protest. But, come on. All right, where were we?
Did that answer your questions?
Yes, thank you.
So first
Oh, when the,
item is parking lot.
the first one is the parking lot. Dana, do we need to make a motion for each one of these?
No, the motion tonight would be if you like what I've put together, either in the ordinance that I've presented, or if you want to add in the reorganization, then you would just make a motion to direct staff to initiate the code amendment process.
Okay. All right, let's see, the other one is when do the commercial design standards apply? Anybody have any comments?
I found that confusing.
I did too, but
I did too.
I don't know what the heck it really means, but I
Did-
know that Dana knows what it really means.
Did you find in the ordinance the section where I changed it? Because I felt like that made it more clear, but you tell me if it didn't and I can try to explain it.
go ahead.
I think I'm telling you that you need to explain it.
Okay. Okay. So chapter 17.94 is our commercial design standards, which are, they cover lighting, parking lots, landscaping, all sorts of different things. And the portion of that code that says scope is how and or when staff apply this particular standard. So the way that it's written right now, the language says all commercial development in any light industrial zone abutting Highway 101 and in the commercial zone subject to other provisions, but then the other provisions sort of go into greater detail. What I'm proposing is crossing out in here. Actually, I'm gonna share my screen, I think. Okay. If it will let me. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes,
So this section here, we would be crossing out in any light industrial zone abutting Highway 101, so that it would just say all commercial development in a C2 zone, this applies, which seems pretty normal to me. Then we would be moving that into the second section where it says all development in any light industrial zone abutting Highway 101 and on property that's specifically bounded, I believe it's over by the cheese factory. That area is also subject to these standards. So it's just clarifying that it's all commercial development in C2 this code would apply to. Does that make sense?
C2 and L1, is that right?
Well, so yeah,
Five.
this Okay, so the code would apply to everything in the C2, but only development along Highway 101 and in a specific bounded area described by the code for the light industrial. So it just clarifies that it's all of C2.
Okay. I
I
think I
got
have
it.
a marginal understanding of that.
No, I know what you're getting at, and I read it earlier. Now I don't have the internet here, so I can't get it up. But it made sense to me to just, I mean, it's a little change. It's not anything major. It's basically stuff we already do.
Yeah, it's really just clarifying for staff when we're talking to the public. I mean, we've gotten the question, so is it only commercial commercial development on Highway 101? But the answer, I think, based on my reading of this, is it should be all commercial development in the general commercial zone.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
Nikki, does this make sense to you as the planning assistant? You understand what it says?
Slightly.
Okay,
I mean, I do agree with Nikki in that sense. I think that this could be more clear overall, but this particular section has gotten me hung up for a while. So this is the one change I thought we could throw in here. If we want to continue to look at this, maybe we can put it on next year's code cleanup to just continue to clarify when it applies and when it doesn't.
I think we have an agreement that these first three are, you know, they're non-impactful and we need to approve them. Let's go to number 4.
Okay, I am going to go ahead and go
Wait a
through
minute.
it on
Unless
my
anybody has any objections. Let's go to number 4.
Okay, tell me if it's too hard to read, but I'm gonna scroll through it on my computer so that you can see it as I'm talking about it. So the reorganization would essentially get rid of every individual code section and instead push it all into 17.08, which is right now establishment of zones. It would become establishment and classification of zones. And then 17.12, which would be all the regulations. I've also included on here, just as a conversation topic, we can include it if you want, the 17.16 special use standards. So we'll go over that in a second. So as you can see, every zone is crossed off here. So when you go through it, I'm going to scroll pretty quickly just to get to this section. So what we've done instead is sort of expand an existing chapter and then include the zone language in here. So the purposes that are listed in each individual chapter right now have just been sort of copy pasted and thrown here. So instead of them being on each individual zone code, they're in one section that just describes them all together. So I'm not going to go through them, but there's 2 for residential, 5 for controlled development, 3 for commercial, 2 for industrial, and then we have 3 for the public facilities, parks, and open space districts. Does anyone have any questions about that? That was really just a copy paste exercise.
No, it seemed fairly straightforward.
Okay. So this second section, and we can make it more clear during the ordinance update what's new and like where it's copied from. This would be just a little bit more information. This part is new, this 17.08.080, describing what's a right of way, what's a parcel, what's a jurisdictional boundary, and what's a natural feature. It's just some additional definitions to give people some understanding as they start going through this. I don't think there's any questions on that. So that one's not a huge change. It's just sort of bringing, again, copy pasting. This one is the big change. So chapter 17.12 would be a new chapter and it would be the zoning district regulations. And essentially what it's doing is it's putting all of the development standards and uses into one chapter, but in tables. So we're getting rid of a lot of pages by doing this. This first section in the allowed uses describes what uses are allowed in base zones, what uses are allowed in overlay zones, and then how they're allowed. So either permitted or conditional. And then I also mentioned that special use standard. I'll just describe really briefly. A permitted use would be like a single family dwelling. There's no standards really for that other than what applies to everything. An accessory dwelling unit would be a special use standard because it has a maximum house size. It has certain parameters that you have to meet in order to have an ADU. So we can include that or we don't have to. I'll kind of go through that as we go. We've also included in here this E through H. I mean, all of this is new, but E through H would be new to our code. Accessory uses would be adding a definition about what accessory uses are. We get that question a lot. People want to build, for example, a shed on their property before they can build a house. We don't allow something like that. The mixed use is also a question we've gotten a lot recently. A good example is Boatworks on the jetty would like to put a dwelling unit on that same lot. Right now, our code really is unclear about whether two outright permitted uses can exist concurrently or one outright permitted and one conditional use. So that would describe that, yes, they could, as long as they both followed separate development standards. Right now, we also don't address outdoor uses or unenclosed activities. A good example would be the woman who set up at the gas station selling flowers. We really have nothing in our code that allows or doesn't allow it. It's very ambiguous. So just having something in here, I think would be helpful. Also, we've proposed including it as a conditional use so that the city has some ability to review activities like that. The next one would be temporary uses. So we get this question a lot as well. What if I want to do something for just a day or two or a weekend and not, apply for a full conditional use permit to do it year round? So we could create a path for temporary uses. And again, you can cross these out if you don't like these, but they're just ways to sort of better describe what we allow or don't allow in a particular zone. So then I'm going to scroll down here, and this is where we get into the uses. So we did put everything into tables. Again, we haven't actually changed anything. This is just sort of taking what's already in the code and putting it in here. I did, as an example, put the S's for the accessory dwelling unit if you wanted to add in that special use chapter, but we can just very easily change that to a P with an asterisk and say permitted but subject to rules in the supplementary provisions chapter. I'm going to go through these really quickly because, like I said, there's nothing new here. It's just organized into tables. And the reason why we've recommended doing this is we'll get people who say, like, I want to have, let's say on this page, a nursing home. Where can I do that? And right now we'd have to flip through every single page to figure out where a nursing home is allowed, rather than on this table. It's pretty easy to see what's allowed and what's not. I'm gonna take a pause right here and ask if anyone has any questions so far.
I was just curious as to what a temporary use could look like.
That's a good question. I think a temporary use, if you wanted to do a one-time event, if you wanted to set up something in your parking lot, let's say, and do like a sidewalk sale, I think that's a temporary use. If you wanted to maybe have, music at your event, at your location that you don't normally have, that would be a temporary use. I'm sure there are other examples as well that I can't think of right now.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and for me going through it, I don't, any comments from anybody, but I love this thing.
Yeah.
In going through it earlier, one thing I would suggest, and it's only a formatting thing, but make sure that all of the abbreviations and codes are on, at least show up once per page. Cause I found myself flipping back pages. Okay, what's that code?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
that's great. That's great feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, it's just formatting or,
And I think it may be a printing error a little bit as well, but I will make sure that that shows up. Or because we had to add in all these different asterisks, which we can also, again, some of these could move to a special use chapter instead of being on here. So.
and I think if it was portrait instead of sideways, you'd probably get a lot more on there.
I tried to do portrait, but
Oh, it
because
didn't work?
so many zones, it didn't work. But we can look at, I I have done it both ways, so.
Whatever, just as long as things are readily available, generally on the page. So you can just flip down, okay, I remember what that is.
Yeah, I think that's great feedback. Thank you.
And I'd agree with that as well. So, Dana, does this change in chapter 17? Does it, in your estimation, address everything that we, think is coming housing wise, cluster cottages?
I mean, no, this doesn't change any of that. So I'll go back up to that, to the first page here. Sorry, I'm doing so much scrolling. Hopefully I'm not making anyone sick. Under residential uses, we don't have any of those listed. The cottage clusters, the, those sort of standards, we don't have any of that right now. But it does sort of tee us up for, I think, more easily adding it in.
Yeah, under the old one, as I recall, we would have had to add it into like 6 different chapters
Right,
if we wanted.
understand.
No, this is so much.
Now you add one line.
That's right. Yeah. And then I think what it also tees us up for is, for example, the model code in that special use chapter. That's where they're putting in all those provisions around what sort of standards might be different for cottage clusters or duplexes or apartment buildings. I think it's just a more, an easier way of presenting the information.
It's definitely an easier way to see the information.
Yeah, I love it.
And I can't think of it right now, but as I was going through this with Nikki last week, I was kind of coming across a bunch of things that I thought, oh my gosh, that's so funny that we allow this here, but we don't allow it there. So I think also take a really deep look at this and see if it makes sense to you. And if not, I think those are things that we can talk about changing in another, not a code cleanup, but probably just an amendment to the code.
Yeah.
So in order to accommodate future housing projects, different types of housing, would that require just adding on a few items in the special area or redoing the chapter?
No, it would just be adding in those code provisions. So right now we add everything into supplementary provisions in the code, which is chapter 17.104, which is so forgotten by most people. I think it's worked out as our catch-all for a long time. But I think a special use chapter makes a lot more sense for stuff like that. So what we'd be doing is adding in a sort of line item here for, let's say, cottage clusters with an S, where we wanted it to be allowed, and then we would put those standards in that special use chapter.
Okay. Is there a downside to the changes you're proposing here? And if in the formatting and all of that?
The only downside I could think of was we do have people who come in and say, I bought property in the R1 zone. What can I do? I think that that's something Nikki and I can just have a 1-pager of each zone, or some handout or some way of still giving folks that information, or something that's just more concise for residential zones, for mixed use zones. So I think the only downside is having to create some info sheets that are maybe a little bit more publicly accessible for people who are just, already bought a property in a specific zone.
Right, and there are not info sheets currently, is that right?
No, because the code is written in a way that the code is the info sheet.
Gotcha.
Long and drawn out.
Yeah, which is sort of redundant for the code, I think, but makes sense as a handout.
Right.
The code as it's currently formatted served a purpose at one point.
Mhm.
We should not disparage our ancestors.
No, I did
It was
not mean
harder to make a table back then.
it served us well for a long time.
I'm
I
all for making it easier though, so thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. And I think as we continue to add uses and add zones and overlay zones, this is where a table becomes much more helpful. And I think in particular, when you start looking at the CDR1, CDR2, or just the CD zones in general, you might see a lot of redundancy there as well. My understanding is that those CD zones started because of the need for geotech reports essentially. But now that we've taken that requirement out of the zone and put it into an overlay zone, they don't make as much sense maybe as they used to. So that's something I think you can think about in the future, is sort of reducing the number of zones to reduce the confusion, and then delineating the difference between those zones a little bit better with additional uses or standards. Okay, any other questions before I move on?
Nope.
I'm going to scroll really quickly through this part and then get us to the development standards. So this is sort of that same thing that we did up top with uses, but down here with development standards. Again, just describing, like I have now a link in here that says design standards that you might have, parking, landscaping, fencing, screening, those sorts of improvements that you need to make. You need to look in the right chapters for those, because right now people don't really know to look for them. So then again, these are just all copy paste D through, I think E down here. These are all just things that were already in the zone that we've just added in here. And then we have included in tables, and I think this one's maybe a little bit easier to read than the use table up above, just because it's a little smaller, but all the standards. So you can see we did change the R2 zone last year. The minimum lot sizes are slightly different, but for everything else, they're exactly the same. So that's just a way to look at it now in a different way, that, you know, what's the difference between all of your zones? Your density is almost the same in all of them. Again, same with the lot width or the minimum lot depth. And this is where there was just a lot of redundancy in the code. So every chapter said the same thing. Got a little bit more complicated with building height, but again, mostly the same. Excuse me. Same with fences and lot coverage. Setbacks. So all of this stuff we've put into tables. I'm sorry, I'm going to mute really quick and cough and not. Sorry about that. So again, yeah, we've just done the same thing here. Any questions or any discussion about any of this?
I have a question, Dana. One thing I couldn't find, and it's probably in there, but I couldn't find it. Do we have the height restriction for property in the CD1 zone west of Beach Loop? I saw east of Beach Loop. I didn't see the west of Beach Loop, which is 24 feet. So I might have missed it. Just want to be sure that's there.
Let me double check. So yeah, 24 feet west of Beach Loop Drive and north of 7th Street, and then 28 feet east of Beach Loop Drive. And
What page was that? It's like,
that's on page
Page
20.
Page 20.
fine,
20.
thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I'm hearing none. I'm just going to move on to the last section and then stop talking because I'm going to lose my voice. Okay, so this last one is that special use standards. This is really a shell because I didn't want to do too much here in case you didn't like it. But essentially what we do is copy in all of these things right here that are pink. Those already exist. We would just be moving them from one chapter to another and then adding in this temporary uses section. Oh, and I think we would actually be adding in the residential care homes and residential care facilities, which again, these come from the model code. So feel free to change them if you want. But Sally, this also describes what a temporary use might be: the Christmas tree sales, vegetable stands, temporary sales offices and model homes, temporary buildings, that sort of thing.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. And obviously,
No. Clearly missed that too.
Yeah, does anybody have any comments? I'll tell you, Dana, when I was going through it this afternoon, I was remembering the first time I got the code when I first joined the planning commission some years ago. And going through chapter after chapter, and basically your mind got so numb reading the same sentences over and over and over that you couldn't spot the differences. This makes it 100 times better. So I really appreciate this.
Me too.
And I don't know who thought of it, but it's really great.
Well, I didn't think of it. I copied the model code, but yeah, I mean, I agree. My first couple days in the planning department were a little bit challenging to figure out what you could do where. So
Yeah.
I think it makes a lot of sense.
I think it's still every time I go into the code, I have to do that.
Just mind
This
numbing.
will stop it. This will,
Yeah. Okay, do you need a motion for this, Dana?
Well, I think so. I think I heard everybody likes everything prior to the special use standards, but is there any disagreement about adding in an additional chapter and moving more stuff around? I just don't want to pile too much on.
I went through it and I didn't have any problems with it earlier. And now that you've explained a few things, I like it. Anybody else?
yeah, I like it too.
I think it's
agree.
pretty good.
Positive, in my opinion.
Sounds like we got 100% here.
Great. Then, no, what I need from you, I can try to scroll back up to it. It's probably too far. A motion to initiate the code cleanup as presented. We'll clean this, this cleaned up part we'll put in the ordinance now, and it'll be a little bit easier to read. Right here, the number 2 would be make a motion to direct staff to initiate a type 4 process to consider changes to Title 17 as part of the annual code cleanup.
I move to make that motion.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Looks like you got your motion. Now you have a whole bunch of work to do.
Most of the work is already done, so I'll just be putting it into the ordinance. But yeah, it will start. So just an FYI on that, we do have to issue, or we have to submit the PAPA notice to the state, which happens 45 days before the first evidentiary hearing. And then we post notice as well. So you probably won't hear this until July, and then the city council will hear it in September.
Okay, well, anyway, I think it's great. So
Mhm.
thank you. That pretty much, how about a staff update?
Oops, sorry
Nick-
about that. Just
want
copy
Nikki?
that.
If your throat hurts, we all got it. We can read it.
Okay, that's great. If you have any questions for me, let me know.
Have you guys all seen it?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, are there any questions?
No.
No.
No?
Very clear.
Okay. Just wanted to mention a few things that that happened that weren't strictly ours over the last month, but there was dedications of the playground equipment, which was pretty cool. There was dedications of the new harbor and the new boat launch, and they all look really, really good.
Mhm. They do.
And I drove by the playground today and there were a bunch of kids playing on that new stuff already.
Mm.
So I think things have been going pretty well. Okay,
So I do have a question, which is one of our citizens sent the email with the alluding to a document you were not able to get to. And-
it said page not available.
Understand. So I guess the question I would have is, do we want to do anything with that? Do we want to?
What is it?
It's basically a travel expert commenting on.
Oh, the Rick Steves thing?
Airbnbs. So it's Rick Steves commenting on the downsides to communities of Airbnbs.
Actually, I did end up reading that then, if that's what it's talking about.
Yeah,
I have seen articles on that, but I did not see this one.
got it.
So do you want to do something with it?
Well, it seems to me that other than just acknowledging it, I mean, we don't have to do anything tonight, but we could do, if we did something in the later, I don't know. I mean, I'm not exactly sure what to do with it.
I don't,
It's, uh, the citizen has an opinion and I mean, at the very least,
Thank you. They can't hear you.
this citizen has an opinion. And, I mean, at the very least, other than just acknowledging it, I mean, is there anything else that we would hope to do if we were in her place?
I tell you what, who's read it?
I have.
I have.
I
It
have-
suggests that most of the properties are becoming Airbnbs, so there's nothing left. And I think we have restrictions that are preventing that.
Mhm.
So that's my opinion after reading it.
It sounds kind of like the article that I read not too long ago in, I don't know, New York Times or something, that, and I thought the same thing as you just said, Tom, that I think we've dealt with most of that with restrictions of density around, it's certain areas where we even allow them. And, but no, and I agree with a lot of that. You can't just let people make these,
Can't let developers just take over.
yeah,
mean-
just build short-term rentals and nothing else. It just doesn't work.
Right, well, I can't speak to Airbnbs because and we haven't had much of a discussion about Airbnb specifically. But I think there's more to do regarding vacation rentals here in the community. And, I don't want to see that get lost. Basically, what Mr. Steves, who wrote the article, what he's suggesting is that we're not losing, the community isn't being lost to developers, the community could be lost to tourists. And so, so that's really, I think, what the issue is. And I very much like, Bill's idea regarding, restricting restricting, somebody, changing, once purchasing a property, having to wait 3 years before it can be a VRD.
Well, you know what, I think we need to wait till another meeting and bring that up and have a discussion on that if we're gonna talk about changing the rules.
I agree.
We can't just do it off the cuff.
I just wanted to make sure that it not get,
Oh, I don't think it's
Dropped.
gonna get lost. Vacation rentals are gonna come up forever. So,
Can I just hop in too and say at the joint planning commission city council meeting, vacation rentals were discussed in great detail. And I think there was an interest in having a joint meeting with the city council specifically on that issue.
Yep.
So staff will be organizing that at a future meeting.
that wasn't my understanding at the time, but since you brought it up, that's great.
no, I knew we were gonna do something. I didn't realize it was that specific, but yeah,
think-
it's not going away.
Yeah, it's not going away. I would not expect that we'd be having the conversation this summer, just with how busy the planning department is. So probably in the fall, we can organize something like that.
In regards to this email, I seem to recall that we did have a discussion on Airbnbs where the city staff was actually going out and looking to see what was being offered as Airbnbs in the area. And the owners were being approached. Am I correct in that?
We use a program called Host Compliance that I owe you guys a presentation on. But it monitors all like 65 different sites that offer short-term rental listings. The city code doesn't differentiate though between an Airbnb and a vacation rental. So Airbnb is just a website. I think the initial idea of it was that you only rented out a room, but now you can just rent out a full vacation rental. So our code really only allows for whole home vacation rentals that can be listed on any short-term rental site, including Airbnb.
All right.
VRBO, whatever,
So-
yeah, they cover them all.
So that brings up an interesting question that I've always wondered myself. If somebody just was renting out a room in their home, is that permitted?
For 30 days or more,
Okay.
they can't rent it out for less than 30 days.
Dana and Nikki, are there any pending VRD CUPs in the planning department at this time? No? Okay, thank you.
Okay. We'll have a discussion here, open discussion. Don,
Nothing.
Bill?
Just as always, thank you, June and Nikki, Dana, and our visitors, both in person and on Zoom.
Gordon?
Not at this time, thank you.
Sorry, I'm gonna break it. I want a little help understanding. I'm a little confused about what is going to happen with the transportation system. Suggestions we had. I'm a little confused as to where we go next.
I can try to answer that, but having not been in the office for the last week, I'm probably not super up to date on what the most recent is. But we have an agreement with ODOT that I want to say expires either at the end of this year or in March of next year. And that is for a grant that we received. I do not think we can get an extension. We might be able to get a small extension beyond that, but so they took in the feedback that we have. They will try to come up with some solutions. If we do, then we go through like we would with any type 4 process of making modifications to both our comprehensive plan, which would adopt the actual TSP as a chapter of that plan, and then the development standards would be adopted either into the code, some of them into the code, and some of them just as documents for the city, like attachments to the comprehensive plan. Another component is that the city can, set policies as well. So the city council can consider policies like we talked about with parking management. So those things are all upcoming.
Do you have any idea how quickly that's upcoming?
I think on the city's website, we have our sort of the timeline of when everything gets accomplished. I believe that the timeline for getting an adoption ready TSP is at the end of this calendar year. So I don't know. I couldn't tell you how soon like the next phase or the next meeting for you all would start, but staff have regular meetings monthly with the with ODOT and the consultant to ensure stuff's moving forward.
Are they gonna have a concrete, to your knowledge, parking proposal? They talked in generalities at the meeting we were at, but I didn't see, or maybe it's on the website and I didn't see an actual suggested plan.
No, there will be no parking plan as part of the TSP, just some general suggestions that would be up to the city council to adopt policies or a plan, either as part of the TSP process or outside of that. But that's not part of the scope, is coming up with a parking plan.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh, I had one other question. I just remembered. I'm sorry. Do we
No,
know?
you lost your turn.
Do we know why Holy Trinity postponed their request to
City-
next month?
Yeah, sure. City staff postponed it after we found some things in their application that would have made us recommend denial. They were how to describe it. They were detail parts of their application that just didn't meet city standards, but that were easily achievable. So we had to push the hearing to allow them to make those changes.
Great, thank you.
Tom?
Nothing really. I just want to say again how much I appreciate the grids that we're going to have now.
Yeah, me
Much,
too.
much easier for me.
Okay, so that is the end of our regular meeting, and so we're going to adjourn the meeting at 10 minutes to 8. And Dana?
Are you adjourning to the CCI?
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't know about that part.
Oh, is that not on your agenda?
It's
Yeah,
on
it
the,
was, but I don't know what it's about.
Oh, well, it's really just, I just wanted to put it on here. The Planning Commission will now serve as the Committee for Citizen Involvement. That was a change that the City Council approved based on a request from staff. We actually thought about doing it a number of years ago and didn't. We tried to reinvigorate a new CCI, but it just ended up being a lot of work for really only 1 or 2 staff people, and felt like our energy was better used in just organizing one meeting and having the CCI, the Committee for Citizen Involvement, for those of you not aware, as just the Planning Commission. So the goal 1 of the Oregon Land Use Program is citizen involvement. I am going to see if I can send you staff. We're fortunate to have a presentation from the Department of Land Conservation and Development about what a CCI does, what its role is. And I think they did a really great job of describing it. But essentially, it's not... I think in the past, sometimes CCIs, from my experience or from other places hearing this, they've acted as sort of junior planning commissions, trying to get people to come to the table for things like Gravel Point or other city events. But really the idea is it's a checks and balances to make sure that we're implementing our code, getting the word out about the comprehensive plan changes, code changes, the times where it's really important to have public involvement, and really when we have the least amount of public involvement. We want people to understand what planning is and what it's not, and what a CCI is and what it's not. So I'm going to see if I can get that presentation for you and follow up. The other thing, though, that I wanted to let you know about is that we have scheduled as one of our first CCI initiatives is a screening of a film about the origin of the Oregon Land Use Program. We've talked about that earlier at previous meetings. And what we'd like to do is have a sort of CCI-esque activity at the beginning to ask people, like they did at the beginning of the Oregon Land Use Program, what do you love about your community, and what do you want to, see continue to be part of the code or continue to inspire the comprehensive plan? Nikki, do you know off the top of your head what day that is scheduled for?
Wednesday, July 24th.
Okay, thank you. So we'll start putting up posters. We're partnering with the library on that one, and we'll provide you with another handout. We hope that you will help us get the word out about that event. I think it's a great way to just really publicize what planning in Oregon is, because it's really unique. The other thing is that I mentioned we were selected to interview for a rare participant, an AmeriCorps member. One of the key components of their job description is going to be working on an updated CCI plan. So I think our existing stuff in our comprehensive plan is great. It's a little bit ambitious, and also it's a little bit outdated technologically. So what we'd love to use that member for is doing a code and comprehensive plan update, as well as an implementation of a new CCI plan. So you'll hopefully, when we get them on board, you'll be an integral part of sort of determining how we are involving the community in the future.
Okay, the one thing I do want to ask, though, I noticed you have a meeting agenda for the CCI, and so I need to call that to order, have a roll call, and open.
Sorry, I hopped ahead then. But I mean, yeah, so in general, I don't think you have to do the roll call again. It would just be everyone is here that was here for the Planning Commission meeting, and we will have agenda items for the CCI in the future.
And the one open discussion item, upcoming public outreach opportunities, which you just talked about.
Yeah.
And, oh, by the way, if you guys have not seen that film, it's really good. The one you're talking about showing.
Thank you.
So is there anything else on CCI that anybody wants to talk about?
So, so we're accepting responsibility for the CCI without really knowing what our responsibilities are. Is that correct?
Well, we will send out that presentation that I think more clearly describes it than any handout I could have given you. So
Okay. And is there gonna be some sort of a bonus for this extra responsibility?
Yes.
a
Yeah,
second
we get to spend more hours here in the city hall.
There'll be
More
a
snacks.
increase in our stipend.
Yeah. A 50.
I don't think I signed on to the CCI thing, actually.
0 times no matter what number is still gonna give you 0.
Yeah. Okay, well, does anybody have anything else? On either the planning commission or the CCI? Then I'm gonna do a joint adjourn. Any objections?
No, but I'm not hearing that gavel anywhere.
Oh,
yeah.
sorry.
Thank you.
Hi, Dana.
Give it up, Dana.
Hey, Dana, thanks for working through your sickness and helping us out here.